American football, Jack Trice. October 6, 1923 should have been just another college football Saturday. But for Jack Trice, a 21-year-old tackle for Iowa State College, it was his second ever collegiate game. It was also his last. Trice was Iowa State's first black athlete, carrying not just his own dreams, but the weight of African-American representation onto that field against the University of Minnesota. Before the game, he wrote a letter to himself, which now sounds prophetic. My thoughts just before the first real college game of my life. The honor of my race, family, and self are at stake. Unfortunately, during the game, Trice was trampled. Accounts suggest he may have been targeted because of his race, though this remains debated. He suffered a broken collarbone and severe internal injuries, including hemorrhaging lungs. He was transported back to Iowa, where he died 3 days later from those injuries. His death echoed through generations. Iowa State Stadium, Jack Trice Stadium, is the only major college football venue named after an African American. His story is brutal. It's a reminder that some pioneers paid prices we can barely comprehend, facing not just the dangers of the sport, but prejudice and discrimination that turned competition into something far darker. Bull riding. Lane Frost. Bull riding is essentially organized insanity. You climb onto 1,800 pounds of pure muscle and fury, and you try to stay on for 8 seconds while it does everything possible to turn you into a broken mess on the dirt. Lane Frost was one of the best to ever do it. On July 30th, 1989, at Cheyenne Frontier Days, Frost had just completed what looked like a perfect ride, scoring in the high 80s, which is elite territory in bull riding. He dismounted, probably feeling that familiar rush of adrenaline and accomplishment. Then the bull, named Taken Care of Business, turned back toward him. Bulls are unpredictable after a ride. Sometimes they just trot away. Sometimes they come back for revenge. This one came back. The bull's horn caught Frost in the back, shattering several ribs and driving them into his heart and lungs. Frost staggered, tried to get up, then collapsed. His friends rushed to him, but he was gone within minutes. He was 25 years old and at the absolute peak of his career, taken out by the violence that makes bull riding simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. Cricket. Phillip Hughes. Cricket seems gentle compared to bull riding or boxing, but a cricket ball is as hard as a rock, and when bowlers fire it at 90+ miles per hour, it becomes a weapon. The day was November 25th, 2014. Phillip Hughes, a 25-year-old Australian cricketer, was batting in a Sheffield Shield match, basically the premier domestic competition. A bouncer, a ball deliberately bowled short to rise toward the batsman's head, came at him. Hughes tried to hook it, a classic aggressive shot. The ball hit him just below his helmet, on his neck. That specific spot just behind the ear is catastrophically vulnerable. The impact caused a vertebral artery dissection, which led to a massive brain hemorrhage. Hughes collapsed immediately. Teammates and opponents alike rushed to him, but he died 2 days later. Cricket had seen injuries before, but nothing like this in the modern era. The sport underwent emergency reviews, and most importantly, helmet designs changed. Basketball. Hank Gathers. Basketball doesn't make most people's lists of dangerous sports, but Hank Gathers proved that danger doesn't always come in the way we expect. Gathers was a beast, a 6'7" forward for Loyola Marymount who could do everything: score, rebound, and dominate games. In 1990, he was one of college basketball's brightest stars, but he was also playing with an undiagnosed heart condition. On March 4th, 1990, during a West Coast Conference tournament game, Gathers threw down a great dunk. Seconds later, he collapsed on the court. Teammates and medical staff rushed to him, but he never regained consciousness. He was only 23 years old. The autopsy revealed he had an abnormal heartbeat condition. He'd been taking medication for it, but had reportedly reduced his dosage because it affected his play. The tragedy raised brutal questions about athlete health, the pressure to perform, and what we're willing to risk for sports glory. Watching the footage, which you can find online, though it's not easy to watch, is surreal. One moment he's flying, powerful and athletic perfection. The next moment, he was gone. Formula One, Ayrton Senna. It was May 1st, 1994, Imola, Italy. The event was the San Marino Grand Prix. Ayrton Senna, widely considered one of the greatest F1 drivers in history, was leading the race when his Williams FW16 failed to navigate the Tamburello corner at roughly 190 miles per hour. The car went straight into a concrete wall. The impact was massive, but cars are designed to absorb that kind of force. What killed Senna was a piece of the car's suspension, specifically the right front wheel's suspension arm, that penetrated his helmet and skull. He was airlifted to the hospital, but doctors knew immediately it was hopeless. Senna was pronounced dead later that day. The racing world went into collective shock. This wasn't supposed to happen to someone like him in the modern era, with all the safety improvements, and definitely not to a three-time world champion who was supposed to be untouchable. His death, along with Roland Ratzenberger's fatal crash the day before during qualifying, forced Formula One to completely reconsider safety. The sport that had killed so many in its early decades suddenly couldn't ignore the danger anymore. Modern F1's extensive safety systems, from the Hans device to improved crash barriers to the Halo cockpit protection, exist largely because of Senna's death. Boxing. Duk Koo Kim. It was November 13th, 1982 in Las Vegas. Ray Boom Boom Mancini versus Duk Koo Kim for the WBA Lightweight Championship. 15 rounds of brutal, unrelenting violence. Boxing is unique among sports because its explicit purpose is causing harm to another human being. You win by hitting someone in the head until they can't defend themselves anymore. Usually fighters survive, but sometimes they don't. Kim was a relative unknown from South Korea, but he came to fight. For 14 rounds, he and Mancini beat each other senseless. Kim absorbed tremendous hits, but kept coming. Finally, in the 14th round, Kim collapsed. He fell into a coma and died 4 days later from brain injuries. The trauma was so severe, so public, that his mother committed suicide 4 months later. The referee, Richard Green, took his own life the following year, haunted by whether he should have stopped the fight sooner. Boxing responded by reducing world championship fights from 15 rounds to 12. They even instituted more strict medical protocols. But the fundamental truth remained. This is a sport where the goal is neurological damage, and sometimes that damage is irreversible and fatal. Luge, Nodar Kumaritashvili. On February 12, 2010, in the Vancouver Winter Olympics on opening day, Nodar Kumaritashvili, a 21-year-old Georgian luger, was taking a training run on the Whistler track. This is the fastest, most technically difficult luge track in the world. Luge is already insane. You lie on your back on a tiny sled with minimal protection and rocket down an ice track at 90+ miles per hour, inches from the ice, with only your reflexes between you and catastrophic injury. The Whistler track took that insanity and amplified it. During his final training run before the competition, Kumaritashvili lost control coming out of the track's notoriously difficult 16th turn. His sled shot up the track wall and he was ejected, flying through the air before slamming into an unpadded steel support beam trackside. The impact killed him almost instantly. The horrifying footage was broadcast worldwide, a reminder that Olympic glory sometimes has the darkest possible price. His death forced immediate track modifications and sparked debates about whether pushing athletes to such extreme speeds and dangers was worth it. Georgia still sent a team to compete, carrying a black armband in Kumaritashvili's honor. His cousin would later compete in luge, carrying on the family legacy, but the shadow of that February day remains. MotoGP, Shoya Tomizawa. Motorcycle racing is perhaps the purest distillation of speed, skill, and mortal danger. You're on two wheels, leaning into turns at absurd angles, reaching speeds over 220 miles per hour, with nothing between you and the track but leather and hope. The list of names is tragically long. Shoya Tomizawa, a 19-year-old Japanese rider, was killed in 2010 when he was struck by following riders after crashing at Misano. Luis Salom died in 2016 after a crash during Barcelona practice, suffering multiple traumatic injuries. Jason Dupasquier, just 19 years old, was killed in 2021 during Moto3 qualifying at Mugello after being struck by following bikes. Each death follows a similar pattern: a crash, usually at high speed, other riders unable to avoid the fallen competitor, massive trauma that even modern safety equipment can't prevent. The sport keeps improving, with better barriers, better rider protection, and better medical response, but the fundamental equation remains: extreme speed plus minimal protection equals constant, hovering danger. Soccer. Andrés Escobar. On June 22, 1994, Colombia was playing the United States in the World Cup. Andrés Escobar, Colombia's talented defender, made a mistake when he deflected a cross into his own goal. An own goal that contributed to Colombia's 2-1 loss and elimination from the tournament. 10 days later, Escobar was in a Medellin parking lot when a group of men confronted him. According to witnesses, the gunman shouted "Goal!" after each of 6 shots fired into Escobar's body. He was 27 years old. The murder shocked the world because it revealed soccer's dark underbelly, the toxic mix of national pride, gambling, drug cartel interests, and obsessive passion that could turn a simple mistake on the field into a death sentence off it. Escobar hadn't committed some moral sin. He'd simply been unlucky in a game where millimeters separate success from failure. W.E. Owen Hart, May 23, 1999. Kansas City. The WWF's Over the Edge pay-per-view event. Owen Hart, performing as the character Blue Blazer, was supposed to descend from the rafters in a superhero-style entrance, a spectacle designed to wow the crowd. But the rigging failed. Hart fell 78 feet, landing chest first on the top rope before tumbling into the ring. The impact ruptured his aorta and caused severe internal injuries. He died within minutes, while the live crowd watched in confusion and horror, many not immediately realizing what had happened. Professional wrestling exists in a strange space between sport and entertainment, choreographed yet dangerous, scripted yet capable of going catastrophically wrong. Hart's death exposed the risks that performers take for our entertainment. The show continued after Hart's death, a decision that remains controversial, but nothing could continue as before. Hart's death forced wrestling to reconsider its most dangerous stunts and raised questions about how much risk is acceptable when the outcome is supposed to be predetermined. NASCAR. Dale Earnhardt Sr. It was February 18, 2001 of the Daytona 500, NASCAR's biggest race. During his final lap, Dale Earnhardt Sr., the Intimidator, one of stock car racing's absolute legends, was running third, blocking for his teammate and his son who were battling for the lead ahead of him. Coming out of turn 4, Earnhardt's car made contact with another vehicle, lost control, and hit the outside wall nearly head-on at roughly 160 miles per hour. In NASCAR, that's not automatically fatal. Drivers walk away from similar crashes regularly, but Earnhardt didn't walk away. The impact caused a basilar skull fracture, a specific type of head trauma that had killed several drivers in preceding years. Earnhardt, famously resistant to new safety equipment, wasn't wearing the HANS device, head and neck support, that might have saved his life. His death was NASCAR's September 11th, a moment when everything changed. The sport that had long balanced danger against authenticity suddenly couldn't ignore safety anymore. Within years, the HANS device became mandatory, along with safer barriers, better seat designs, and extensive other improvements. The 1955 Le Mans disaster. On June 11, 1955, during the 24 Hours of Le Mans, the world's oldest and most prestigious endurance race. Just over 2 hours into the race, Pierre Leveg's Mercedes-Benz 300 SLR collided with another car, launching into the air. What happened next was a nightmare in real time. The car flew into the crowd at over 150 miles per hour, disintegrating on impact. The engine, hood, and suspension components became shrapnel, tearing through the packed spectators. The magnesium body of the car ignited, creating an inferno, and Levegh was killed instantly. At least 82 spectators died, with estimates going as high as 120. Over 180 were injured. It remains the deadliest accident in motorsport history, and indeed, one of the worst disasters in all of sports. The race continued, controversially, with organizers fearing that evacuating the crowd would block emergency vehicles. Mercedes-Benz withdrew from the race and from motorsport entirely for decades afterward. The disaster exposed the casual attitude towards spectator safety that had characterized early motorsport. Fans were often separated from racing cars by nothing more than hay bales and hope. Le Mans forced a reckoning. Was the entertainment worth this kind of risk? How close should spectators be to machines traveling at lethal speeds? The answer came in transformed track designs, better barriers, and a fundamental shift in how motorsport balanced spectacle with safety. But 82 people went to watch a race and never came home. A reminder that sports dangers don't always stop at the competitors. These deaths span decades, continents, and completely different sports, but they share common threads: the thin line between glory and tragedy, the unpredictability of sports, the way a split second can divide life from death. They also share a legacy. Say, for instance, Jack Trice's name on a stadium, reduced rounds in boxing, hands devices in racing, and improved helmets in cricket. Each death forced the sports world to confront uncomfortable truths and eventually to change. But change doesn't erase loss. These weren't just athletes or competitors. They were people with families, dreams, futures that ended on fields, tracks, and rings where they expected to compete. Their deaths remind us that sports, for all their beauty and excitement, carry real costs. Sometimes, the ultimate cost. So I'll leave you with one last question. If it were someone you loved out there on that field, in that ring, on that track, would any victory ever be worth that goodbye? Which death still haunts you to this day? Let us know in the comments.